They say betrayal never comes from enemies. Comes from those you trust most. And on the evening of my family's housewarming party, I learned exactly how true that was. The air was crisp in the foothills of Asheville, North Carolina. The leaves had just begun to turn, painting the trees along Willow Ridge Avenue in shades of burnt orange and crimson. I stood on the front porch of the historic craftsman-style house I had poured every dollar and dream into. My heart should have been full. But all I felt was an unsettling tightness in my chest. Guests bustled inside, sipping cider and commenting on the woodwork. I had handpicked the throw pillows, the rugs, even the kitchen hardware. This wasn't just a house. It was my redemption. My proof that all those sleepless nights as a nurse in the ICU had meant something. That the sacrifices had not been in vain. But then my mother, Marilyn, waved a folder in my face. "You're being selfish, Claire," she snapped, her voice sharp over the hum of conversations. "Zachary has a baby coming. He needs this house more than you do." The world tilted. I blinked. "What are you talking about?" I asked, but I already knew. Her tone. Folder. The way she had avoided my gaze all night. Something terrible had happened. "The house is in Zach's name now," my stepfather Walter added from behind her, his voice casual like we were discussing grocery lists. My mouth went dry. "That's impossible," I said, though my voice sounded hollow. "I signed the agreement. I paid for it. I have the papers." "You helped your family," my mother said. "That was the agreement." "No," I whispered. "The agreement was that I owned the house." Across the room, my stepbrother Zachary stood proudly, a glass of bourbon in one hand, his other hand on his wife's shoulder. His smug grin twisted my stomach into knots. He hadn't contributed a single dollar. Hadn't lifted a finger. And yet here he was, basking in praise while standing on a foundation I built. Lena, my best friend since nursing school, moved beside me. Her voice was low and firm. "Claire, something's wrong. Legally, they can't do this without your signature. Unless they forged it." The word forged hit me like a slap. I staggered back, the warmth of the room turning cold around me. I had spent years working overtime, missing holidays, putting away every penny for a home of my own. And in one stunning, vicious move, they had stolen it from me. Guests around us began to sense the tension. Some looked away. Others exchanged awkward glances. I caught Aunt Elise's eyes from across the room. She was frowning, holding her wine glass tightly. She knew something was wrong too. "I want to see the deed," I said, my voice cracking. "We already filed it," Walter replied. "It's done. And honestly, you should be proud. Zach's starting a family. You're just alone." My jaw tightened. The room spun again. The bitterness in my mouth was unbearable. I wanted to scream, cry, shove the bourbon glass out of Zach's smug hand. But I didn't. Instead, I turned around, walked calmly to the kitchen, and opened the top cabinet where my mother always kept important documents. There, behind a stack of old manuals, was the original agreement. I stuffed it into my bag. "I need air," I said to no one in particular, and stepped out onto the back porch. Out in the quiet, the mountains seemed to breathe with me. I flipped through the papers with trembling fingers. And then I found it, a letter from their attorney dated 2 weeks ago. A warning. Transferring a deed without my consent would be considered fraud. It was signed. Stamped. I stared at the letter until the ink blurred from my tears. They had known this was illegal. They had done it anyway. My phone buzzed. A message from my mother lit the screen. "Stop sulking. Come inside and smile for Zach. This is a happy day. A happy day." That was the moment something inside me changed. I wasn't going to be the daughter who gave in anymore. Not the sister who got stepped over. Not the nurse who healed everyone but herself. I opened my text app, typed one line to Lena's brother, Noah, who worked as a real estate attorney. "Are you available tomorrow? I need legal help." He replied within seconds. "Bring every document. 9 As I walked back into the party, I saw my family laughing with Zach. They didn't even look up. They thought I would fold. That I would cry and disappear. But I smiled. A quiet, dangerous smile. Because they had no idea what I was capable of now. The next morning, I sat in the reception area of a quiet law office tucked between a bookstore and a bakery downtown. The air smelled like cedar and old paper. I hadn't slept. My hands were stiff from gripping the folder all night, and my throat felt raw from swallowing back every scream I wanted to let out the night before. But I was here. I had shown up. And that meant something. "Claire Dawson," a calm voice called. I looked up to see a man in his mid-30s, sharp suit, gentle eyes, holding the door open to his office. "I'm Noah Patel. Come on in." I followed him inside and handed over the folder without a word. He spread the documents out on his desk, skimming them with practiced efficiency. The silence was thick. I sat on the edge of my seat, clutching a coffee I no longer wanted to drink. He murmured, flipping to the notarized agreement I'd signed with my mother. "You paid the full down payment, signed ownership forms, and were the sole applicant for the financing. That alone gives you a strong claim." He pulled out the lawyer's warning letter next. "And this," he said, tapping it, "this is a game changer. Their attorney explicitly warned them that transferring the deed without your consent could be considered fraud. They went ahead anyway." I nodded, trying to hold my face still. "They used me, Noah. They knew what they were doing. They've always put Zach above me. But this time they took everything." He leaned back in his chair. "You want the house back?" "Yes." "Are you ready for what that means?" "Emergency injunction. Possibly involving criminal charges if forgery is confirmed. Things could get ugly. Family ties won't protect them once this moves into court." I hesitated. A part of me still clung to the illusion that maybe, just maybe, they would come to their senses, apologize, try to make it right. But another voice inside me, louder now, said they never will unless you force them. "I want to file everything," I said. Noah gave a single nod. "We'll start with an injunction to freeze any changes to the property. That means no renovations, no selling, no new loans against the house. Next, we'll file to void the deed transfer on the basis of fraud and misrepresentation." As he typed rapidly, I sat back and let the wave of exhaustion crash over me. I wasn't used to fighting like this. As a nurse, I fought to keep people alive. Not for my own survival. Not like this. When I left his office, it was nearly noon. My phone had already blown up with missed calls. My mother. Even Walter had called twice. I didn't answer a single one. By the time I got to the hospital for my evening shift, news had already reached them. The text shifted in tone. At first my mother's were dismissive. "Claire, don't be dramatic." Then, "This is going to tear the family apart." Finally, "How could you do this to us?" Zach's messages were worse. He called me ungrateful, selfish, jealous. Said I had no idea what it was like to have a family to support. I almost laughed at that one. Hadn't I been supporting them for years? I put my phone on silent. By midnight I was deep in the ICU. A young man had been brought in after a car accident, barely clinging to life. I worked through the night alongside other nurses and surgeons, focused entirely on my patient. For those hours I forgot about the house, the lawsuit, the betrayal. I was just Claire. A nurse doing her job. A life worth saving in her hands. At 4 a.m. I finally took a break. I sat on the bench behind the building, sipping tea from a paper cup, when Lena appeared beside me with a blanket. "I heard you went through with it," she said. I nodded. "Good," she said. "It's about time someone held them accountable. They're going to hate me for this. They already chose Zach over you. You're not breaking anything, Claire. You're just refusing to keep pretending it's not broken." She rested her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of warmth. The following day things exploded. Papers were served at the Willow Ridge house. A courier handed the documents directly to Walter as he was bringing in groceries. According to Lena's cousin, who lived 3 doors down, Marilyn screamed so loud the neighbor's dog started barking. Zach tried to slam the door, but the process server had already dropped the injunction into his hands. Noah called me that evening. "They've retained counsel. Their lawyer reached out to discuss settlement options." "Already?" I asked. "They're nervous." "Good. But don't expect them to admit guilt easily. People like this, people who've built their entire lives on manipulation, they always think they can lie their way out." I thanked him and hung up, then curled onto the couch with a blanket and stared at the ceiling. The house was never just about bricks and wood. It was about proof. That I mattered. That I had earned something. That I wasn't just the fallback, the backup plan, the daughter who didn't complain. And now I would take it back. The next morning my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and froze. "Marilyn." Zach. Standing on my porch like nothing had happened. I opened the door but didn't move aside. "We need to talk," Marilyn said, trying to sound calm. Her eyes were puffy. "There's nothing left to talk about. This isn't how families handle things," she said, voice rising. "You went behind our backs. You're trying to destroy us." I laughed. "You already destroyed me. I'm just cleaning up the pieces." Zach stepped forward. "You're not going to win. You'll be the one who looks bitter and petty. You think people will side with you. I don't care who sides with me," I said. "This isn't about who looks good. It's about what's right." He scoffed and turned away. Marilyn reached for my arm. "Claire, please." I pulled away. "You taught me something valuable," I said. "Blood doesn't mean loyalty. And love isn't supposed to be a transaction." I shut the door slowly. Not with anger. But with finality. Inside, I leaned against it and closed my eyes. One chapter had closed. Another was just beginning. It was strange how quiet my apartment felt the day after I shut the door on them. No more texts. No more calls. Just silence. A heavy silence that hovered like fog. I didn't know whether to be relieved or unnerved. But I did know this: I had crossed a line I could never uncross. And I wasn't going back. Lena came over that morning with cinnamon rolls and a notebook filled with checklists. She sat cross-legged on my living room floor, her hair tied up in a messy bun, flipping pages like a general preparing for battle. "Okay," she said. "Let's make sure we've got every single piece of evidence nailed down." I pulled out a box from under my bed. It held more than just documents. It held years. Copies of wire transfers. Screenshots of text messages. Photographs of me walking through the house with Zach and Marilyn, back when they pretended it was ours together. Receipts from the furniture store where I'd paid for nearly everything in the living room. Then came the folder I'd taken from the kitchen cabinet. I had barely looked at it since the night of the party. Now, as I spread it out on the floor, Lena leaned in and her eyes went wide. "This is it," she whispered. "Claire, look." She pointed to a page, an addendum to the deed, dated and stamped. But the signature that claimed to be mine wasn't mine. It looked like my name. But not my handwriting. Not my curves. Not the careful loops I always made on my D's and A's. "They forged your signature," Lena said. Her voice wasn't shocked. It was angry. Cold and sharp. I stared at the paper for a long time. Something about seeing it, my name faked in ink, felt like a deeper violation than anything else. They hadn't just taken money. They had tried to become me. Pretend they were me. Use my identity to steal my future. Noah confirmed it a few hours later. "I've compared the documents you signed against this one," he said over the phone. "There's no doubt. It's forgery." "What does that mean legally?" "It means you're not just dealing with a civil matter anymore," he said. "It's criminal. I've sent everything to a contact at the district attorney's office." I sat in silence for a moment. "I don't want to send them to prison," I said. "You don't have to," he replied. "But they need to believe you're willing to. That's the only way people like this back down. They think love will make you fold. That family guilt will stop you. Don't let it." The word family had begun to rot in my mouth. I couldn't say it anymore without thinking of betrayal. That evening I walked through my apartment in a daze. The windows glowed with the golden light of late October. I watered my houseplants. I folded laundry. I checked my work schedule. All the while my mind circled the same thought. They didn't think I'd fight back. The next morning I got a call from Aunt Elise. She rarely reached out, always preferring to stay on the sidelines of family drama. But today her voice held a tremble I hadn't heard before. "I heard what happened," she said quietly. "I just wanted to tell you. I believe you. And I'm sorry." I blinked back sudden tears. "Thank you," I whispered. "They've been telling everyone it was a misunderstanding. That you got confused. But I know you, Claire. You don't confuse things. You don't blow up over nothing. They forged my signature." Silence on the line. Then a sharp inhale. "I always thought they favored Zach," she said. "But I didn't realize it had gone this far." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "It's okay. I'm dealing with it now." "I hope you burn them to the ground," she said, then paused. "I didn't mean that. I hope you win." After we hung up, I stared at the ceiling for a while. The rage had softened into something different now. Resolve. It no longer came in flames. It came in steel. 3 days later, Noah sent me the court summons. The official motion to reverse the deed transfer. The request for restitution. And a copy of the warning letter from their own lawyer, now part of the legal file. The package arrived at the Willow Ridge house on a Thursday morning. Lena's cousin said she saw Marilyn drop to her knees on the front lawn, wailing, while Zach yelled into his phone so loudly half the block heard it. They had thought I wouldn't do it. Now they knew I had. Later that week I got a voicemail from Walter. "Claire, it's your stepfather. I know things have gotten tense, but this isn't necessary. We're family. Family works things out." I didn't respond. Then Marilyn left one. "I can't sleep. I cry every night. I never meant for things to go this far. You've always been so sensitive." Still no reply. Finally, Zach sent a text. "You win. Are you happy now?" But I didn't want to win. I wanted them to admit what they did. To look me in the eye and say, "Yes, we stole from you. We lied. And we never thought you'd stand up to us." A week later, Noah called with news that nearly knocked the breath from my chest. "They want to settle," he said. "Full reversal of the deed. Payment of legal fees. And an additional $50,000 in damages." I swallowed. "That's fast. They're scared." "They should be," I said. But I wasn't done. "I want them to sign a notarized statement," I said. "I want it in writing. That they tried to defraud me. That they forged my name. That they admit to it so they can't spin it later." Noah paused. Then said, "You'll have it." I sat alone in my apartment that night watching rain fall outside my window. I thought I would feel triumphant. Vindicated. But what I really felt was free. The kind of freedom that only comes when you stop waiting for people to change. And start changing everything yourself. The notary's office smelled faintly of ink and lemon cleaner. A long mahogany table stretched across the center of the room, and at it sat the people who had once claimed to be my family. Marilyn clutched a tissue in her hand like it was the only thing keeping her from unraveling. Walter sat with his arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the wall like if he refused to look at me this might not be real. Zach sat at the far end, his face expressionless, his jaw tight enough to crack bone. A man stripped of control, sitting in a room he never imagined he'd end up in. Noah entered beside me and gave a short nod to the notary, a silver-haired woman with square glasses and a bored expression. Everything about the moment felt surreal. If you had told me 2 months ago that I'd be sitting across from my own mother while she confessed to attempted real estate fraud, I would have laughed. Or cried. Probably both. But now I just felt still. "This document," the notary began, tapping the top sheet, "is a legally binding acknowledgement of wrongdoing. By signing, each party admits to participation in a deed transfer executed under false pretenses, including the unauthorized use of Claire Dawson's signature. You agree to forfeit all claims to the property located on Willow Ridge Avenue and accept the settlement amount negotiated by counsel. You also acknowledge that this admission may be used as evidence in the event of future litigation." Marilyn's hand trembled as she picked up the pen. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered without looking at me. I said nothing. Walter signed next, his jaw twitching, the pen scraping across the paper like it offended him to obey. He didn't say a word. Just scribbled his name with the same careless arrogance he had always worn like a second skin. Finally, the notary slid the document toward me. I signed it with a hand that didn't shake. And that was it. It was over. Except it wasn't. Because I had one more surprise. When we stepped outside the office, the fall air hit my face like a blessing. I took a long breath, then turned to Noah. "I want to sell the house." His eyebrows lifted. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "It's never really going to be mine. Not the way it should have been. I don't want it anymore. I want something that doesn't carry their fingerprints." He gave a small smile. "I know just the person to list it. And Claire, this house is in a prime location. You're going to make a good profit." The next week passed in a blur of appraisals, paperwork, and showings. The moment the listing went live, the offers came pouring in. One, from a real estate developer, came in at 30% above market value. They wanted to convert the property into upscale apartments. I accepted the offer without hesitation. When the closing day came, I didn't invite anyone. I didn't walk through the house one last time. I didn't take pictures. I signed the paperwork and handed over the keys without ceremony. This wasn't a celebration. It was a release. Lena met me at our favorite cafe that afternoon with 2 coffees and a grin that could light up a power grid. "You actually did it," she said, sliding into the booth. "You got the house back and then sold it out from under them." "I didn't do it for revenge," I said, though a small part of me admitted it did feel satisfying. "I did it to be done." "Fair," she said, raising her cup. "To being done." I tapped mine against hers. "To starting over." Later that night my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from Marilyn. Her voice was raw, frayed at the edges. "I heard you sold it," she said. "How could you? After everything? That was supposed to be our home. Zach is devastated. We thought you would at least let him stay." I deleted the message. As I owed them nothing. With the profit from the sale, the settlement, and the years of savings I had left untouched, I bought something I never thought I could afford. A cottage just outside the city. Set against the edge of the mountains, it had a wraparound porch, a fireplace made of river stone, and a backyard that sloped into a patch of pine trees. There was a shed for tools, a kitchen with a big farmhouse sink, a window above it that looked out over the garden. I stood in the driveway the first morning after I moved in, the wind tugging at my sleeves, and I let myself cry. Not out of pain, but relief. No one knew this address except Lena and Aunt Elise. It was mine. Entirely mine. Untouched by lies. Unsoiled by theft. It smelled like sawdust and clean floors and the possibility of peace. I planted the first row of violets 2 weeks later. Then tomatoes. Then cucumbers. I spent my evenings reading on the porch, the scent of soil still on my hands, and every breath felt easier than the last. Lena came by one evening and laughed as she sipped tea on the steps. "I can't believe this is your life now," she said. "You're like a domestic goddess." "I'm just tired of surviving," I said. "I want to live." And for the first time in years I actually meant it. But of course peace never lasts forever. Because one day in the middle of a crisp November morning, I opened my front door to find someone standing at the edge of my porch. His face was thin, his eyes bloodshot, his clothes rumpled. "Claire," he said, hands stuffed into his coat pockets. "I just want to talk." I didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stared at him. He shifted uncomfortably under my silence. "I lost everything," he said. "Jessica left me. I'm couch surfing at Walter's now. No job. No money. I need a place to start over." I tilted my head slightly. "You want to move in with me?" "No," he said quickly. "No, I thought maybe you could loan me something. Just until I get back on my feet." He looked so desperate. So hollow. And still I felt nothing. "No," I said simply. His face crumpled. "You can't just turn your back on family." I stepped forward just enough to let the door close behind me. "You're not family," I said. "You're someone I used to know." He stared at me for a moment. Then turned and walked down the steps. I didn't watch him leave. I went back inside, poured a cup of tea and sat by the window. The garden was starting to bloom with winter vegetables. The air smelled like rosemary and cold earth. And inside me everything was quiet. Everything was whole. The snow came early that year. Thin sheets of white dusted the pine trees behind the cottage, and the garden soil turned hard beneath my gloves. I didn't mind. The cold gave the air a kind of honesty. It stripped everything down to what it truly was. No hiding, no pretending. I had learned to live quietly. The cottage needed tending, but in ways that soothed me. I fixed a creaky step on the back porch. Painted the front door a soft teal. Replaced old curtain rods and rearranged furniture until it felt just right. Each change made the space feel less like a purchase and more like a home. My shifts at the hospital had evened out too. Since the lawsuit, I'd stopped saying yes to every holiday shift. I stopped covering for colleagues who took my reliability for granted. I said no with ease now. And something amazing happened. People respected it. One of the newer nurses, Danny, started following me around during rounds. At first I thought she was just eager, but one night in the break room she pulled me aside. "You're not scared to speak up," she said. "How do you do that?" I smiled over my coffee. "You stop worrying what everyone else thinks and start remembering what you need." She nodded slowly, then said, "My boyfriend, he gets mad when I pick up extra shifts. But we need the money. He just sits at home playing games." I said nothing at first. Just looked at her. You already know what to do, I finally said. Her eyes welled up and she nodded. 2 weeks later she told me she'd moved out. Found a roommate. Started smiling more at work. It felt good to help someone who didn't take advantage of me. Meanwhile, the messages from Marilyn had almost stopped. There were a few around Thanksgiving. One was a voicemail that started with a long silence before she said, "I wish you'd come back. Zach is struggling." Another came on Christmas Eve. "We saved a place at the table for you." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I spent Christmas with Aunt Elise and Lena at the cottage. We baked cinnamon cookies, drank wine, and sat on the living room floor opening small, thoughtful gifts. Elise brought a framed picture of me and my father from when I was 6. Before he died. Before Walter. Before Zach. "I thought you should have this," she said, her eyes kind. I touched the glass gently, remembering the day it was taken. My father had carried me on his shoulders in that photo. We were at a fall carnival. He was laughing. I was reaching for a balloon. "I didn't think anything from those years still existed," I said. Elise smiled. "I kept it hidden. I wasn't sure why. But now I know." We hugged, and for the first time in months I felt safe in someone's arms. New Year's came, and with it, a sense of lightness I hadn't known in a decade. I spent the morning walking through my garden, sketching ideas in a notebook for raised beds and herb walls. The frozen soil didn't scare me. Spring would come. It always did. Then one afternoon in February my phone rang again. It was Jessica. Zach's ex-wife. I let it go to voicemail. But she called again. Then texted. "Please." I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Asterisk asterisk. Curiosity tugged at me. I called her back. Her voice came through, weary but sincere. "I found out Zach opened 2 credit cards in my name while we were married. I didn't notice until collections started calling. I'm trying to clean it up, but I don't know where to start. Someone said you might be able to help." I exhaled slowly. "Yeah," I said. "I can connect you with my lawyer. His name is Noah Patel." There was a pause. "You're really going to help me?" "You've never done anything to hurt me," I said. "You've been through enough." The next day I gave her Noah's information and explained what documents she'd need. She sounded relieved. Grateful. Not demanding. Not entitled. Just human. Later I told Lena about it over dinner. "You sure that was smart?" she asked. "I'm not helping him," I replied. "I'm helping her. There's a difference." 2 weeks after that, Noah called to tell me Jessica had a solid case. Zach had left a trail of evidence as messy as the one he left me. "Some people never learn," he said. "Or maybe," I said, "they don't want to." That spring I planted violets again. They bloomed in clusters near the front steps, bright and alive against the pale wood of the porch. I started composting too. Added a bird feeder near the shed. Every morning the yard came to life with color and movement. One day as I sat with a book and coffee, Lena plopped down beside me and sighed dramatically. "I still can't believe you didn't burn that house down," she said. "Too much paperwork," I replied. He grinned. "You're like the queen of emotional revenge now." Calm. Silent. Deadly. "I don't want revenge," I said. "I just don't want to be a fire extinguisher anymore. No more putting out their flames." "Then what do you want?" I looked out across the garden. A pair of bluebirds were hopping through the grass near the fence. "I want this," I said. "Peace. My own space. A life that doesn't revolve around fixing people who don't care if they break me." Lena raised her mug. "To not fixing broken things." I tapped mine against hers. "To growing new ones instead." We sat in silence, the kind that doesn't ache but soothes. The kind you only earn when you stop apologizing for your own peace. And inside me something kept growing too. Something bold. Something unbreakable. By late spring the garden had become my sanctuary. Rows of violets bordered the stone path I'd laid by hand, and tiny green shoots of basil and thyme were pushing through the soil with quiet determination. Everything around me was growing, not just in the ground but within me. My life no longer orbited around their drama. I had become the center of my own world. I was sipping tea on the porch one morning when I saw a familiar sedan roll slowly down the road and stop at the edge of my driveway. I recognized it instantly. Walter's old silver Toyota. I stayed seated, letting the steam from my cup rise between us like a veil. A moment later the driver's door opened and Marilyn stepped out. She didn't look like the woman I remembered. Her hair was thinner, her face pale. She clutched her purse like a lifeline. For a long moment she just stood there, unsure if she should approach. Then she took a single step forward. "I know you don't want to see me," she said, her voice rough with age and wear. "But I needed to try." I didn't speak. She took another step, then stopped at the edge of the porch. Not asking to come up. Not daring to. Her eyes scanned the house, the fresh paint, the garden beds. She looked as if she had stepped into a life that once could have been hers, and now clearly wasn't. "You always did love flowers," she said softly. So I said nothing. "I'm sorry," she added, and for the first time, there was no performance in it. No dramatic sighs. No calculated tears. Just a raw whisper, like the wind might carry it away before I even heard it. "You're not here for Zach," I finally said. She flinched. "No." "Then why?" Her eyes welled, but she held them steady. "Because I thought motherhood meant sacrifice. But what I did was not sacrifice. It was betrayal. And I didn't realize it until you disappeared." I looked down at the cup in my hands. The color of the tea had darkened, gone cold. I set it aside. "You didn't just take a house," I said. "You took my trust. You sold it off like it was spare change." "I know." "You looked me in the eye," I continued, "and told me I was being dramatic. That I'd get over it. That I didn't need a home because I had no one to share it with." Marilyn's face crumpled. "I was wrong." "Wrong doesn't cover it," I said, my voice flat. "You looked at everything I built and handed it to someone else like I was nothing." She looked down at her shoes, lips trembling. "I'm not here to ask for money. Or favors. I needed you to know that I regret it. Every day." I stood up slowly and stepped to the edge of the porch. "You don't get to come here and plant a few words in the ground and expect something to bloom," I said. "That's not how gardens work. And it's not how healing works either." She nodded. A slow, painful nod. "I understand." We stood in silence, the distance between us both small and infinite. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back to the car. The tires crunched the gravel as she pulled away. And with every inch of distance I felt my chest loosen. Later that night, I listened to the voicemail she had left weeks earlier but I'd never opened. "I know I did something unforgivable," she had said. "But I hope one day you'll remember the mother who held you when you were sick. Not just the one who broke your heart." I deleted it. Because the past didn't get to rewrite itself. That week, Lena came by to help me build a trellis for the climbing roses. She hammered nails while I held the beams, and the sun shone high and warm above us. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel lighter." "What changed?" She came by. Lena froze mid-swing. "Marilyn." I nodded. "And?" I listened. Then I let her go. Lena smiled slowly. "You didn't scream?" "No. Just said what needed saying. And let the silence say the rest." The next day I got an unexpected letter in the mail. It was from Jessica. A simple white envelope with my name handwritten in careful cursive. Inside was a note. "Claire, I don't know what you went through exactly, but I know what it's like to be gaslit, silenced, and stolen from. Thank you for helping me take my life back. I filed the police report. Zach has a warrant out for financial fraud. I thought you'd want to know. Warmly, Jessica, ***. I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter in one hand, the other gripping the edge of the chair. A strange sense of closure swept through me. Not because he would face legal consequences, but because his damage had finally caught up with him. Not through me, but through someone else he underestimated. I didn't feel vengeance. Or victory. I felt balance. That evening I walked barefoot across the garden, the grass soft beneath my steps, the scent of rosemary thick in the air. The trellis stood firm and tall, already holding the first curling arms of new growth. Aunt Elise came by that weekend, bringing a basket of fresh peaches from the market. We sat on the back porch, the air warm and fragrant, and she glanced out over the garden. "You made this," she said. "Every inch of it." I nodded. "And you didn't burn anything down to do it. You just built something better." That night, I opened a fresh page in my journal and wrote only one line. "Sometimes silence is the loudest answer you'll ever need." And I let that be enough. A few weeks after Marilyn's visit, I got called into my supervisor's office at the hospital. I assumed it was about scheduling, Maybe another request for me to cover a weekend shift. I didn't expect to find the director of nursing sitting beside her. Claire, my supervisor began with a smile, we've been watching your leadership these past months. The way you've supported the new staff, your composure under pressure, your initiative during emergencies, it's impressive. I felt a flicker of panic. Was this a performance review? We want to offer you a promotion, the director said. Nursing coordinator for your unit. Better hours, a pay raise, and a say in how the team is structured. For a moment I couldn't speak. Then I realized I wasn't afraid. I wasn't wondering if someone else deserved it more, or worrying how to please everyone around me. I simply said, thank you. I'd be honored. I walked out of that office with my ID badge still clipped to my collar, but I felt different. Taller. Grounded. Like someone who had earned her place instead of begging for it. Lena and Aunt Elise insisted on celebrating. We cooked a small dinner at the cottage, grilled vegetables, lemon pasta, and sparkling cider. As we ate on the porch, Elise raised her glass. To Claire, she said, for finally putting her name on something they can't take away. That line stuck with me, because for so long everything I had given, money, time, love, had come with no name attached. No credit. No acknowledgement. But now the door to my cottage had a nameplate. A small one, carved in wood, hanging beside the frame. Claire Dawson. No one else's name. No hyphens. No hidden signatures. Just mine. That weekend I spent hours rearranging my garden beds. I added lavender near the steps and replanted the violets in a tighter circle. As I worked, I noticed someone standing just beyond the fence. A woman in a black coat holding the hand of a small boy. It was Jessica. And the boy, her son. My nephew. I stood slowly, brushing dirt from my hands. Jessica didn't try to open the gate. She simply nodded once. Hi, she said. I wasn't sure if I should come. But Eli's been asking about his aunt. My heart caught. He was older now, but I recognized his eyes. They were Zach's, yes, but also softer. Curious. Unburdened. I brought him by, she continued, because I wanted him to see something good. Something strong. I opened the gate without a word. Eli stepped through first, looking around with wide eyes. Did you make all this? He asked, pointing to the flowers. I did, I said. He walked carefully as if stepping through something sacred and crouched beside the violets. They're my favorite color. Jessica smiled from the path. He remembers things. Even from before the divorce. He used to talk about the big house. The porch. But I wanted him to see where love lives now. We sat on the steps and drank lemonade. Eli picked a small tomato from the vine and declared it the best thing he'd ever tasted. Jessica watched him with eyes full of quiet pride. Thank you for helping me, she said when he wandered toward the shed. You helped yourself, I replied. That's the only way it ever lasts. Before they left, Eli hugged me. Just a quick, innocent squeeze around the waist. But it felt like a gift. A healing I didn't know I needed. After they drove off, I stood in the center of my yard and listened. To the breeze. To the birds. To the absence of tension. This was what life sounded like when no one was lying. When no one was taking. That night, I lit candles in the kitchen and made dinner for myself. Soft jazz played in the background. I ate slowly, savoring the silence. Then I pulled out the notebook where I had started sketching garden ideas and flipped to a new page. At the top I wrote, Project. Community garden. Because peace, once planted, deserves to be shared. The next morning, I visited the town council building and put in a proposal to turn an unused lot near the hospital into a community garden for staff and patients. I'd fund the soil and tools. The city would provide the space. It was a small dream, but a real one. One that bore my name from the very beginning. When I left the office, I passed the mirror in the lobby. I barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I stood differently. I no longer bent to fit into rooms that didn't welcome me. I no longer explained why I deserved space. I just walked in and filled it. With roots. With truth. With my name carved not into paper but into earth. Spring melted into early summer, and the air in Asheville turned warm and honeyed, thick with the scent of magnolias and new grass. The garden at the cottage had exploded into bloom. Lavender danced in the breeze beside rows of tomatoes, basil, and violets. The old oak tree behind the shed offered dappled shade over a new bench I'd built myself, stained, sealed, and solid. The community garden proposal was approved faster than I expected. The hospital's wellness committee jumped on board, eager for anything that might reduce staff stress. They offered to cover half the cost if I coordinated the rest. I said yes without hesitation. Within a month, the vacant lot across from the emergency wing was transformed. Nurses came by during breaks to water the seedlings. Doctors pulled weeds while talking through cases. Even some patients in recovery rolled their wheelchairs down the path to breathe in the rosemary and mint. One evening, I arrived after my shift to find Danny kneeling by the lettuce bed with her little sister beside her. He waved me over. "She's learning what real care looks like," Danny said with a soft smile. That's when I realized something. I had become the kind of person I used to need. Not someone who bent over backward to be chosen, but someone who stood tall and made space for others to grow. Back at the cottage, life settled into a rhythm that was as unfamiliar as it was welcome. Mornings with tea on the porch. Midday gardening or hospital shifts. Quiet dinners. New books. Small joys. Steady ground. And still every now and then I'd hear from them. Sometimes it was Marilyn, leaving messages that rambled between guilt and nostalgia. Sometimes Walter trying to sound like nothing had happened. But most often it was silence from Zach. Until one afternoon in July when a letter arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name in block handwriting on the envelope. I opened it slowly. "Claire, you probably won't believe me and I wouldn't blame you. But I need to say this even if it doesn't change anything. I ruined everything. I know that now. Not just the house. Not just our relationship. But every chance you ever gave me to be better. You worked. You sacrificed. You earned everything. And I took it because I thought I was owed something. I wasn't. Jessica told me what you did for her. And Eli. Thank you. I'm in a program now. Court mandated. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted to write this before I left the city. You won, Claire. Not in court. Not with money. But because you kept your soul intact. Zach ***. I read it twice. Then I folded it neatly, walked to the fireplace and set it in the flames. I didn't need his apology. Not because I didn't deserve one, but because I had already built a life that didn't depend on receiving it. 2 days later, I sat at a small garden party held behind the hospital. The staff had surprised me with a plaque for the community garden fence. Carved into it was a simple message. In honor of Claire Dawson. For planting more than seeds. ***. As they clapped and cheered, I smiled, not out of pride but peace. Afterwards, Lena found me near the rosemary plants. She handed me a small envelope. "It's not from me," she said. Jessica dropped it off. Inside was a photograph. Me and Eli sitting by the violet bed. He was laughing. I was leaning down mid-sentence, pointing at the soil. The moment was quiet, natural, one I didn't even know had been captured. On the back, Jessica had written in her looping handwriting. "He says this is where good things grow." I placed the photo on my bookshelf next to the framed picture of my father that Aunt Elise had given me. 2 versions of love. One lost too soon. One finally found. That night I sat on the porch under the stars, the air warm, the sky endless. The old version of me, the one who bent, who begged, who bled herself dry for scraps of love, was gone. Not burned. Not buried. Just outgrown. I had built something different. Not flashy. Not loud. But strong. Unshakable. Rooted. And roots, I had learned, don't beg for space. They claim it. They stretch deep into the soil and make it theirs. They hold the ground even when the wind howls. Even when storms come. Especially then. August brought a soft heat that pressed gently against the mountains, and the days felt slower, soaked in golden light. The violets had faded into their second bloom, and the basil had grown tall and unruly, stretching toward the sky like it had something to say. I let it be. Some things are meant to grow wild. The cottage had settled around me like a favorite sweater. Every creak in the floorboards, every chip in the old windowsill, every knot in the wood felt like it belonged. The ghosts of what could have been no longer lingered in corners. I had invited light into every room and the light stayed. The hospital garden had become more than I imagined. Patients requested to visit it as part of their discharge goals. Children undergoing chemotherapy decorated plant markers with stickers and handprints. One elderly man came every Thursday to read aloud from a book of poems beneath the oak tree, even when no one else was listening. One afternoon I found a handwritten note tucked under the garden gate. Read. To whoever made this place. You gave me one good morning when I didn't think I'd have another. Thank you. Asterisk asterisk. There was no name. Just that single sentence. I placed it in my journal without a word. Some gifts don't need explanations. At the cottage, Lena had started calling it the healing house. She came by more often, sometimes with paint swatches, other times with new plants she found on sale. Aunt Elise brought homemade jam, and Danny's little sister left sidewalk chalk messages by the front step. One evening as I watered the roses, Lena sat cross-legged on the porch, sipping from her mug. I know you don't want to hear this, she said. But you've changed. I glanced up. In a bad way? She shook her head. No. Just, you used to shrink, Claire. Even your voice got small when they were around. Now you take up space. You laugh louder. You breathe deeper. I didn't answer. But I felt it too. There were still moments. Days when an old habit tried to creep in. When a voicemail from Marilyn made my chest tighten. When I'd hear someone mention Zach's name in town and wonder what came next. But the difference was this. I no longer responded with guilt. I responded with grace. For myself. The next Sunday, Elise invited me to a small reunion at her house. A few distant cousins. Nothing formal. I almost declined. But something in me said asterisk go anyway. On your terms. Asterisk. I wore a dress I liked, not one chosen to impress. I brought a homemade pie from the berries I'd grown. I arrived late. Left early. And in between I smiled when it felt real and stayed silent when it didn't. As I was leaving, a distant cousin I barely knew approached me by the front porch. I heard about what happened, she said. The house. The legal stuff. Your mom's been telling people her side. I'm sure she has, I replied. She hesitated, then added, but people talk. And what I hear most. They say you finally stood up. That it inspired them. I didn't know how to respond. So I just said, thanks for telling me. When I got home, the sun was setting in long streaks of orange and violet. I stood in the middle of the garden, arms loose at my sides, watching the light fall over everything I'd planted. The porch lights blinked on one by one. The scent of thyme rose from the earth. In the distance, thunder rumbled. A summer storm coming in. I didn't run inside. I stayed where I was, letting the first drops of rain touch my skin. This time last year I would have been breaking. This time last year I would have been waiting for an apology, hoping someone else would rescue me from the wreckage they caused. But now I stood barefoot in the garden I had built with my own hands. Let the storm come, I thought. Let it come. As I had roots now. And where the light falls I bloom. It had been exactly 1 year since the housewarming party that wasn't mine. 12 months since I stood in the kitchen of a home I paid for, listening to my family justify the theft of my future. 12 months since I walked out with a folder of documents and a heart cracked wide open. A lot can happen in a year. The morning of the anniversary I woke to birdsong and the soft rustle of wind through the trees. I brewed a cup of coffee, stepped onto the porch and watched the dew glisten across every leaf like it had been placed there just for me. The air smelled like lemon balm and warm earth. I didn't feel anger anymore. Not sorrow either. What I felt was steadiness. The kind of calm that comes only after you've walked through fire and come out whole. I spent the day like any other. Watering plants, answering emails, checking in at the hospital garden, then coming home to trim the climbing roses along the trellis. But that evening something new arrived. A delivery box. No return address. Inside was a small carved wooden plaque. Read. Claire Dawson's Garden. Where strength took root and never let go. There was no note, but I recognized the handwriting on the label. I placed the plaque at the edge of the path by the gate. Visitors would see it when they entered and again when they left. A quiet reminder that healing can grow in the ruins of betrayal. Later that night, Lena joined me for dinner. We sat on the porch with glasses of chilled wine, our plates filled with vegetables from the garden. The cicadas hummed in the distance. You know, she said, tapping the rim of her glass, you should write a book. About all of this. I laughed softly. What would I even call it? She smirked. Asterisk the garden she grew alone. Asterisk. I thought about it. The title didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. We clinked glasses. To every seed they said would never grow, I said. To every woman who stops waiting for permission to live, she added. The stars came out one by one, scattered across the sky like the universe was painting itself fresh just for us. I leaned back in my chair, legs curled beneath me, heart full. The world hadn't changed. There were still people who would take without asking, still voices that tried to shrink me. But I had changed. I no longer bent to fit into anyone else's mold. I no longer stayed in rooms where I wasn't safe. I no longer lit myself on fire to keep others warm. Instead, I planted and watered and waited. I learned that growth is slow, that healing takes time, that peace doesn't arrive, it's built choice by choice. And I learned that sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is build a life so beautiful, so rooted in truth, that the people who tried to destroy you can do nothing but watch it bloom without them. As the last light faded from the sky, I stood and walked barefoot through the garden. The wind stirred the violets, the mint, the rosemary. Everything whispered, "You made this. You chose this. You're no longer theirs. And never will be again."